Good afternoon, everybody. So today you're going to hear a series of talks showing that although we are individuals, we don't live alone. And in fact, each one of us is a symbiosis with a complex microbial community called our microbiome. And it's fair to say that we are covered in microbes both inside and out. And just to quickly sort of, okay, apologies, my screen is not moving. Am I doing? Okay, so just to define a microbiome, it's the aggregate of all microbes and their genes that reside in a particular ecosystem. And we have about 100 trillion symbiotic microbes and their genes in and on every single one of us. And most of these microbes are in our gastrointestinal tract, and where they contribute up to maybe 2 kilograms of our body weight, which is like 4 bags of sugar, which is significant. And it's fair to say that recent work has clearly established that these microbes, our microbiome, is required for our physical and mental well-being. And other speakers this afternoon will probably make further reference to this really important relationship. So in the few minutes that I have with you, I wanted to very quickly give you, in very general terms, a talk about another equally important relationship with microbes. And that's the relationship between microbes and the health and well-being of our home and planet Earth. And to start that, in 1998, Stephen Jay Gould, who's an eminent evolutionary biologist and a very popular and important science communicator, he published an article in the Washington Post entitled Planet of the Bacteria. And in this article, Stephen Gould, he put forward reasons for considering microbes as the most important group of organisms on the planet. And he argued that humans live as merely as guests on this planet that is dominated by microbes. And he presented 5 pillars to his argument. And these are ubiquity, utility, time, indestructibility, and taxonomy. I only want to quickly talk about 3 of these now this afternoon. The first, time. He said that microbes have been on the planet long before we have been here. And the Earth is about 4.5 billion years old. Single-celled microbes were the first living organisms to arrive on the Earth, and that was about 3 billion years ago, with the first multicellular organisms arriving around 500 million years ago. Human-like animals appeared maybe 1 million years ago, and Homo sapiens, that's us, we only arrived in 300,000 years ago. So all animals, including humans, have clearly evolved in a world that has been dominated by microbes. And it's no surprise that we have such an intimate and important relationship with these microbes. His second argument was ubiquity, or his pillar was ubiquity, that microbes are everywhere and present in really large numbers. And he put forward a number of it's estimated that there are 1 nonillion bacterial cells on the planet. That's 1 with 30 zeros after it, which is a phenomenal number. In comparison, there are 8 billion humans. That's 8 with 9 zeros after it. So there's a lot of bacteria. And if you let each bacteria be represented by a 2-cent coin and you stacked those coins on top of each other, the stack would be 1 trillion light years high. And that would extend beyond the limits of the current universe. So it's a huge, phenomenal number of bacteria present on the Earth. And this leads to the third pillar, his ubiquity, or his utility pillar. The Earth has evolved in an environment that has long been dominated by microbial cells. And it's these cells, these microbes, that have made the Earth what it is today. Microbes are just simply incredibly useful. And they have activities that are essential for the well-being of our planet. And I'll just briefly mention a few of these activities, again, in very general terms here. So this is the planet Earth. It's a beautiful, remarkable place, and it might well be the only planet in the universe that can sustain life as we know it. And there are 3 habitats, primary habitats on Earth. These are called biomes: the marine habitat, the terrestrial habitat, and the atmospheric habitat. And these habitats are connected, interconnected, and also interdependent on each other. So humans, members of the terrestrial habitat, breathe oxygen, which is found in the atmospheric habitat. In addition, each of these habitats is associated with a microbiome, which is essential for the health and well-being of this habitat. So for example, in the terrestrial habitat, you have bacteria in the soil that convert nitrogen gas into nitrates. This is a process called nitrogen fixation. So these nitrates are essential for plant growth. So bacteria fertilize the soil for plant growth, and we could not feed the world without this activity. Similarly, there are other bacteria in the soil called denitrifying bacteria that convert excess nitrates back into nitrogen gas, replenishing the nitrogen gas in the atmosphere, and this balanced cycle is called the nitrogen cycle. In another example, the oceans, which cover 70% of our planet, they have a microbiome that is essential for the well-being of this important resource. And a major component of this microbiome are bacteria called cyanobacteria. And cyanobacteria are photosynthetic. They, like plants, can take carbon dioxide from the atmosphere and convert it into organic carbon, sugars, and biomass. And this would ultimately lead to a reduction of CO2 in the atmosphere. And this explains why the marine environment is such an important carbon reservoir and vital in our fight against the current climate change crisis. So photosynthesis also produces oxygen. And these cyanobacteria were responsible for the oxygenation of our environment, of our atmosphere, an event that was called the Great Oxygenation Event, and it occurred about 2 billion years ago, and that allowed multicellular life to evolve on the planet. However, recent work using new DNA sequencing technologies has identified other members of the marine microbiome that with equally important activities in what is called the carbon cycle. These bacteria, called Pelagibacter ubiquae, are non-culturable in the laboratory, so they were not known to exist until quite recently. And they are, in fact, the most numerous bacterial cell on the planet. There's more Pelagibacter cells on the planet than any other cell that we know of. And these bacteria do not photosynthesize. In fact, they harvest energy from the sun using proteins called bacteriorhodopsins, which are quite similar to the light-sensitive proteins found in the back of our eyes. So they sense and harvest the photon energy from the sun and convert it into energy for the bacterial cells. However, in contrast to cyanobacteria, Pelagibacter, they use oxygen, so they consume oxygen, and they produce CO2 and release that CO2 into the atmosphere. So microbial activity in the ocean can significantly affect CO2 levels in the atmosphere. And of course, this is very important in the current climate change crisis. So in this very brief presentation, I hope that I have managed to convey the idea to you that we are merely guests on a planet that is totally dominated by microbes and their activities, and the health and well-being of our home is dependent on these various activities. For example, the nitrogen and carbon cycles, as I just discussed. And in fact, to perhaps highlight how important microbial activity is to this planet, it is just for you to take home with you this message that the moon is what the Earth would be like if there were no microbes. So no oxygen, no soil, no life. Thank you.